the mic is on. Everyone can hear me at the back? Excellent. That's definitely a yes. So it's amazing to see so many of you here. So thank you for coming. We are just going to kick off because we've got quite a full agenda and I don't want us to be late out. So first of all, I want to say hello. Welcome to this Women in Research workshop. It's a very unique workshop and I'm really excited to have you all here and to be able to be here. Just slide. So, sort of as we begin, I would just like to take a moment to reflect on the fact that we are actually meeting today on land where the traditional owners have gathered, shared knowledge, and learned from one another for tens of thousands of years. And their deep connection to country and commitment to community have sort of shaped the knowledge systems that continue to influence how we learn and work today. So I really feel like today, by sharing and reflecting together, we're taking part in that long tradition of learning on this country. I hope the conversations we have feel meaningful and relevant as we go about our lives as researchers, colleagues, and community members. And so I'd like to, just have a moment to think what we're actually doing here and how much time has gone before in doing that. Before we start as well, I would just like to thank the many, many schools and institutions, and I hope I have everyone captured here, who have actually contributed to supporting this event and making it happen today. It's been amazing to have such, support from so many different areas of UQ. Particularly thankful to the UQ Business School, the management discipline, Martin Edwards, Brent, Chad, who've been involved in supporting, Professor Sharon Parker's visit as well. So thank you all. It doesn't go unnoticed. Here, so I'll just introduce Professor Sharon Parker. We're waiting for the VC to arrive. So just to say, I obviously have known Professor Sharon Parker for many, many years. She gave me my first postdoc in Australia, so super grateful for that, and it's been a great opportunity to come all the way over from Perth. Professor Sharon Parker is the ARC Laureate Fellow and John Curtin Distinguished Professor at Curtin University and Director of the Centre of Transformative Work Design and the Future Work Institute, where I did my postdoc, and I stayed there for well over 5 years, so clearly did a good job there. And yes, I'll hand you over to Sharon now.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and welcome everybody. It's just so fantastic to see a room full of women and women supporters. Hope we're going to have fun today. That would be probably my main goal, is that you enjoy yourselves today and hopefully meet some new people, get a few insights. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about women in research, and I see Debbie has just walked in the room perfectly on time. And then we will hand to Debbie. But what is Women in Research? What is this all about? The Australian Research Council, with the Laureate scheme, they always identify one female from the social sciences who got a laureate, and one from social sciences, arts, humanities, etc., and one from science, to have a particular role around supporting women, and they give a little bit of extra funding for that. And that's what this Women in Research series was born through, that process. So we created a website, first of all, and I went around the country, and I had actually one of the best days of my life ever interviewing female laureates, astrophysicists, art historians, and it was just a magic day. And those interviews actually are captured on our website, and that's the website there. We designed the website to be two things. One, evidence, because there's a lot of research on these topics that we're talking about: careers, progress, gender equality. So we wanted to be evidence-based, but we also wanted to have the inspiration and the inspiring component. And that's why we have the interviews with women laureates. And then actually, we were planning to go on a roadshow, exactly like what we're doing today, and go around Australia and run these sorts of workshops. And we did one in Curtin, and Debbie actually introduced that. I'm not sure if you remember, Debbie. One of the things Debbie said at that, which really resonated, I don't know if you remember, but you said that your children, if you're in that phase and it's an overwhelming phase and you've got young kids, they grow up fast. And my children have grown up fast. That's one at the back there. Talia is volunteering to help us today. And you were absolutely right. They do. So that really resonated with me. So, but then COVID struck. So we're like, what are we going to do? We can't do roadshows. So we started these webinars. And I encourage you to go on the website. We are up to webinar number 37, I think. And all of the laureates today on this panel have participated in these webinars. So if you've got questions you don't get answered today, please go on the website and enjoy those webinars, because we get now up to 800 women registering to attend because they find them useful and valuable. So just want to very briefly mention before I hand you to Debbie, and can I just ask Talia could you maybe put some more air conditioning on? Because it feels, I don't know, so people feel hot? Yeah, everyone's getting hot. Or someone might be able to help you, Angie. Excellent, thank you. Why women in research? Well, actually, I had a lovely conversation with my daughter yesterday, and she said to me, yeah, Mum, feminism's all right, but I think it's gone too far. And I was intrigued by this comment. So I said, tell me more. Sorry, Talia, to put you in it like this. And she said, well, nowadays, women who choose to stay home and raise a family are vilified on the web, apparently, and considered boring and not worth following and these sorts of things. And, so that's not feminism. Isn't feminism fundamentally about choice? Choice for men and women to stay home if they want, and for that to be economically, socially viable, possible, valued. But equally, it's a choice about women working, and we're not at the stage yet where women are having those equal choices. I looked at the statistics for DECRAs. I think linkages, the most recent round of linkages, it was 23% female CIs. COE directors in the latest round, 25% female directors, one of which was me, I'm happy to announce. VCs, 25% of VCs only in Australia are female. So we are not there yet with the choice. And also when we make choices, women face some unique challenges. First of all, we know that women are doing the second shift still, which means you work all day and then you go home and you work all night with all the domestic duties and so on. We know that women face disproportionate levels of harassment, bullying. We know that women are still subjected to bias and stereotyping and discrimination. So we're not there yet. So Talia, we still need more feminism. But women in research is really about providing support for women researchers who are on a tough journey anyway. Let's face it, research is tough. Rejection, funding challenges, and then women often have extra layers of challenge. And this is about providing support for all of us, but also the people that are mentoring women. So that's why women in research is happening. So today we're going to have an ARC Laureates panel session, then we'll go to some breakout groups, then we'll come back. But I will, without further ado, would you like to introduce Debbie Caroline?
Well, I think I'll hand it straight over to VC.
Excellent.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And Sharon, sorry to be a few minutes late. I did just get distracted on my way talking to somebody outside the Mickey building. Thank you, Caroline, and good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see so many people here. Really impressed and delighted, obviously, that the session is being held here today. Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting here this morning, and pay my respects and our respects to elders past, present and emerging as we walk together on the path to reconciliation. Obviously delighted to acknowledge Professor Sharon Parker, ARC Laureate Fellow, and John Curtin, Distinguished Professor, and it's wonderful to see you again, Sharon. And as I say, thank you for being here. And can I also acknowledge our 5 panellists, our own 5 ARC Laureate Fellows, and Janeen Baxter, Gabrielle Belz, Sawa Dolnankar, Jolanda, Jetten and Karen Thorpe. And a very impressive panel, and I'm sure everyone will appreciate hearing from you. And finally, can I thank everybody who's registered for this workshop. Welcome again and thank you for coming. Now, whether you're an early career researcher, a seasoned academic, a professional staff member, or an ally, your presence here this morning really does matter. It signals a deep and shared commitment to making research more inclusive and equitable. And I'm thrilled that you're here because I think you will all gain a lot from this morning's discussions, but we will also gain a lot as a university. You'll hear from Sharon, and you've already heard a bit from Sharon, as well as our UQ ARC Laureates about their career trajectories in research, the challenges they've faced and the lessons that they've learned along the way. You'll also have the opportunity to ask questions and to get involved, and we sincerely hope that the workshop will be a forum for some authentic, robust and insightful conversations. And Caroline, I'm really looking forward to what comes out of the workshop. We obviously spend a lot of our time on this issue, and if there's things that we could do better, things that we could do differently, we really need to hear it. Now, in the spirit of disclosure and open discussion, I'm going to start this session by sharing a personal story from my own career. And I must admit, I was thinking about this one. Some of you will have heard it before, and then thinking, I'm kind of old now. This was a long time ago. And I think one of my messages today is these issues have not gone away. But as I say, I've had a rather sobering experience when I was about to finish my PhD at ANU, eager to move on to the next stage of my academic career, which of course brought me here to UQ initially as a postdoctoral research fellow. I was in my final year, I was expecting my first baby, and I can vividly recall the discussion. It was in the top of the physics building at ANU where psychology was, talking about this to my supervisor. And I'd always regarded him as being open-minded, forward-thinking, and we had a very good relationship. So I was expecting a kind of positive response to this. But instead, and he was somebody who had a lot to say about everything, he looked completely stunned and was actually speechless for a while, and I'd never actually seen him speechless. And then he just looked at me. And remember, this is my first year at UQ was 1990. This is a long time ago. He looked at me and he said, "You'll never make it in academia.
Wow.
It's impossible." And as you can imagine, I was somewhat floored by his response, but I soon discovered that it actually came from the right place, to the extent that it reflected his view of the reality of what it was like, what it was like here in Australia, but also from his own experiences at the University of Michigan in the US. He'd had a long career there. He'd run a big social science institute at Michigan, and that was his experience. And we then went on and talked about it a bit, and he had all of these examples back then of women who had failed to be able to kind of get to that next stage. And because often when you do finish your PhD, it's often that time where you're also thinking about having a family. So in many ways, he gave me a bit of a challenge, I guess. But it was the first time in my research career that I realised, and the realisation really then started to sink in, that my pathway was going to be different. It was going to be more complicated, and in many ways likely to be more difficult than for my male counterparts. But as I say, perhaps what is most surprising in retrospect is the fact that more than 35 years later, Nick, my oldest, is now 37. That's a long time ago, that these issues still impact on the lived experiences of many of our colleagues. And I think in many ways, that was when I was thinking about this over the last couple of days. That's a long time, and the sector's been working on these issues, but there is more that we need to do. So to zoom out from the personal in Australia, and Sharon's cited some of this data, according to ARC data, now women make up close to 50% of our research workforce. So if you look at the research workforce in this country, it's pretty balanced. Sounds promising, but unfortunately that number doesn't tell the whole story. At early career stages, women are well represented. In some disciplines, they're even in the majority. So that's good. It tells us that women are here, women are more than capable, as we all know, and that they are deeply invested in the future of research in this country. So it's positive, and you look at that data, and it's looked like that for a long time, for quite a number of years, quite frankly. Yet as academic careers progress, the landscape begins to change, and women remain underrepresented at senior levels of academia and research. We've made shifts here at UQ, mainly at level D. We've made some shifts at level E, but there is still more that we need to do. So in other words, what you see is that women are more likely to be found in junior academic roles, while men continue to dominate at the professorial and executive positions. In health and medical research, women make up more than half of the workforce, but hold only about 1/4 of senior leadership roles and just over 1/5 of lead investigator roles. So these numbers, as we all know, don't reflect a lack of talent or ambition. Rather, they reflect some structural barriers that have accumulated over time. And for me, these barriers fall into two main categories. One is, of course, the juggle of work with the unequal caring and domestic responsibilities that women still bear, which means we disproportionately interrupt our careers as females or opt for part-time work at what are critical stages, particularly in the academic career. Because, as I say, people are often coming out of PhDs, at a time when decisions are being made around having children and families. Now, these kind of barriers, what was really interesting, the COVID period was a really interesting period in many ways. It was a natural experiment for many different aspects of our lives. But the barriers became particularly visible during COVID, when we saw the blurred boundaries between work and home responsibilities directly impact on academic publishing rates for women. In fact, a global study at the time estimated that the publishing output gap, which we knew was there already, between male and female academics widened in just 1 year, from 17% to 24%. And of course, that was, as we know, a lot of that burden and homeschooling and everything else fell disproportionately on women than on men. And we saw a big shift, and that's a comparatively big shift in 1 year across that publishing gap. The second category of barriers, as I said, are less perceptible still in many ways, but they are very impactful. And I'm talking about impediments, and Sharon's raised this, but such as heavier service and mentoring loads, even when colleagues are in junior and mid-career academic roles, and subtle and still somewhat invisible, unfortunately, biases in hiring, promotion and recognition. And these factors, of course, exacerbate those that underpin the lower application rates we still see for women applying for major research funding in Australia. So the application rates are different, the success rates are identical, and if anything, in some schemes, they'll be higher for women than for men, for reasons that we understand. They'll often have spent more time, got more feedback over grants. But I think you've got these two sets of barriers that come around as a consequence of domestic responsibilities, but also, that academic housework, as it's often referred to, is also disproportionately the burden falls on women rather than men. And, certainly in my experience of being head of school quite a number of years ago, and in other roles, it was often the More often than not, it was my female colleagues who put their hand up for roles like chief examiner, which, has lots of things to do, allocating tutors to courses, whereas the research committee chairing tended to be a more competitive role at the school level. So, there are still issues that we need to deal with, but I do think there is real reason for optimism as we look forward. Across Australia, universities and research organisations are actively working to address gender inequity. Mentoring and sponsorship programs are growing. Conversations about flexibility, caregiving and wellbeing are becoming more open, and they're becoming more honest. Importantly, women are building strong, supportive networks, sharing knowledge, lifting one another up, and reshaping academic cultures from within, which is why workshops such as this are so important, because change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in rooms like this, through listening, through learning, through reflecting, and imagining better and more progressive approaches. So today shouldn't just be about identifying problems. It's about exploring solutions, celebrating progress where it's occurred, and equipping yourselves and us as an institution with the tools to support women more effectively into the future. So as you move into the workshop, I encourage you all to be open, generous and curious. Share your experiences, listen deeply, and remember that every conversation we have is helping to build the kind of inclusive research environment that we're certainly seeking to embed here at UQ. So delighted to see so many people here, prepared to have the discussion. And as I say, be robust, explore what's possible, criticise where you think we've got programs and they're just not working. We need to hear that as much as the ideas. But on that note, it's my great privilege to formally welcome and introduce our guest of honour. And we'll test the fire as well. And the convener of this workshop, Professor Sharon Parker. And I had the great privilege of working with Sharon as a colleague during my time at Curtin University, where she serves very appropriately as the John Curtin Distinguished Professor in Organisational Behaviour.
Thank you, Professor Terry. I think it was a perfect blend of what we try to do in women in research, which is evidence, but also inspiration. So thank you for sharing your story so openly, but also for being here. I think that says it all. So thank you to Debbie Terry. Excellent. Right, we are going to kick off now with the Ask the Laureates Anything session, but we're going to start to introduce the laureates with a somewhat different introduction. We're going to do this thing called the 6-word memoir. You've possibly done it, or you may have seen me do it at other events. And the idea for this is apparently, it's probably urban myth, but Hemingway was challenged to tell a story in 6 words. And the story that he came up with was For Sale, Baby Shoes, Never Worn. Says a lot in 6 words. So I have challenged our wonderful laureates today to come up with their own 6-word memoir about their career or anything they want to say, really. And so I will start, first of all, with Professor, and these are all laureates. These guys have amazing CVs. I'm not going to go through them because that would take all of our time. We're just going to kick straight into their memoirs. But Professor Janeen Baxter is the director of an ARC Centre of Excellence for Children and Families over the life course. What is your 6 words, Janeen?
That was quite a challenge, actually. I had to think about it. I practiced it with my team, some of whom are here, and I came up with a few words, and then I put it into Chat GTP, and I had a look at what AI said, and then I went back to what I thought. So my 6 words were farm girl, rejects housework, supportive mentors, which is kind of like my last story, really, in 6 words.
Excellent. Brilliant. And the first 2 of those, in fact, all of those personally resonate. I didn't know you were a farm girl. I'm also a farm girl. It's interesting. We talk a lot about different sorts of disadvantage. and advantage. And actually, we never talk a lot about people coming from the rural sector or disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds. We don't talk about that so much in academia, at least, or I don't. So, yeah, just curious, can you reflect on how did that help or hinder you, Janeen, in your career?
So I was listening to Debbie. She talked about the personal experience of her supervisor saying it's going to be very hard, you'll never make it. I think from I went to a very low SES school in rural New South Wales. There was very few people went to year 12. I think most kids in my cohort dropped out at year 9 or 10. And we had a career counselling day in about year 9 where I was encouraged to pursue domestic-oriented careers like nursing or, you know, that kind of. And I remember thinking, I'd be a terrible nurse. I didn't want to look after other people. This is not. So it was kind of quite confronting that was the trajectory that this particular person had come in from a bigger town to kind of tell us all about our future. So I really rejected that. And I think that was the first point. I thought, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something that it's a bit more exciting and
Thank you.
interesting for me. So, yeah, I think being told that you can't do something
Yeah.
was a real inspiration for me to say,
Interesting.
well, yeah, just watch.
This is very resonant with Debbie's story. Yeah, thank you. And I want to point out that we've been running these Women in Research webinars for several years now. Every single one of these female laureates has been on them. And that's unusual to have all of the female laureates from one university attend. So we get a disproportionate number of UQ laureates, which really says something unique about you guys. Let's go to you, Professor Jetten, who's head of School of Psychology. Can you share your 6-word memoir?
I have to admit, I can't remember them.
I'm just having written down here.
Can
You can explain it. Went with the flow, passion found purpose.
Yeah. Look, I was thinking about what Janeen said, and I think I'm coming from a very different, similar sort of place as where Janeen is coming from, and we talked about that a fair bit in the past, right? The idea that going to university, I was first in family, but also my family had no expectations. I remember that my mom, when she found out that I was pretty good at studying, that she had high aspirations for me in the sense of, oh, maybe you could, work in a local pharmacy and be the assistant
Yeah.
to the pharmacy. That was the
Yeah.
more like, wow, that would be wonderful, right? So I was a bit like, well, Mom, I think what we could do is, a bit more than that. But so I think I always felt very privileged going to university. I always felt very privileged to have opportunities to do research. So yeah, I feel that actually motivated me, and I felt I had great opportunities to do that. And so what I always felt is the passion that I have for research, that I could just sort of get paid for it too. So, and that is, in a way, I think the best you can achieve. You wake up in the morning and you think, yeah, I want to do this. I'm looking forward to the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jolanda. And I'm going to call you by your first name after introducing, if that's okay. But next up, we have Professor Gabrielle Belz, who is the leader of the Frazer Institute and an immunologist, so more on the hard science end of the spectrum. Would you like to share your 6-word memoir, if you can remember it? I've also got it written down if you can't.
It's always a challenge when someone asks you for the 6 words. And so I wrote down resilience, boldness, and intentionally reaching beyond discomfort. And I think that really captures what we need to be armed with. I too came from a rural background and was told that a kid from Queensland was not going to be able to make it in the big city, so Sydney or Melbourne, and wanted to be a Jillaroo, coming from 5 generations of teachers, but the first generation to go to university. My parents did not think that was a good idea. And so there was a big push for all of us to go to university, for which we're now eternally grateful. But there are a lot of hurdles when you come from a rural environment in Australia. It's the tyranny of distance we talk about. It limits the opportunities you might naturally have. But I think the thing is when you get to the big smoke, you have to embrace the opportunities. We also went to a school which was not the flashiest school in the country, who announced to 3 of us who wanted to go to university that they basically generated teachers, nurses, and as I call it, checkout chicks. We wanted to do medicine, vet science, and law. So they sort of disowned us from that point in time. Somehow we banded together to sort of go, well, you just watch us, which we then did, and we all end up at university.
Brilliant.
But I think you have to gather together all your support frameworks and develop your own internal voice so that you can push past people saying you won't make it. And sometimes that's a social construct. They've seen this over and over again, so they're not personally pointing towards you. They're just saying, in my experience, this is a hard road.
Right.
But I think the efforts you're doing now really brings together a network of people that you now can leverage.
I think that's a great highlight around the importance of collection and support and, in the face of challenges. And in this case, the face of low expectations, really. Thank you so much. So let's now go to Sarah, who runs the Low Harm Hedonistic Initiative. I put an abbreviation on it. I can't read it. Tell us about your 6-word memoir.
Yeah, my 6-word memoir changed this morning, actually. I submitted a different one. And then I kept thinking about it. It's not easy, right, to capture it all in 6 words. But I'm really happy because I think my 6 words are reflected in all of your explanations. And mine is, I do what I want to do. And it sounds quite arrogant, actually, but it's not, right? You all said, people told me what to do, but I want to do what I want to do. And I'm very bad at taking orders. And and I think to do what you want to do is so valuable in many aspects. It forces you to make good choices because you end up doing stuff you love. You do stuff you love, you do it well. It forces you to take responsibility, right? Like, how often am I asked, how do you deal with your work-life balance? And I think, well, frankly, I wanted children and I want this job and I want to help this young person write a DECRA and I want to do this. So I'm going to fix it. This is not something that's been imposed on me. So it means I'm not a victim. I'm in control. I do what I want to do every single day. And another thing that resonated with me is this anger that drives you, right? I remember I started in Australia at the University of Wollongong and I heard ARC, ARC, ARC. So I go to the personal assistant of the head of school and I say, what's that ARC thing? And she looks at me and says, it's not for you. Well, you beauty, she just did me such a big favor just right there and then, because I still didn't know what it was, but I wanted it, right? So there you go. That's me.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And absolutely last but not least, Professor Karen Thorpe, who's the group leader of the Queensland Brain Institute.
Hi. So mine, I do resonate with a number of these, but mine are mother, teacher, researcher, determined, passionate, and difficult. I changed mine this morning as well. And I do resonate. I could have put, instead of farm girl, Essex girl, for anyone who's British in the audience, you would know, or popular TV. That's where I was born. I was born in a housing estate in the United Kingdom to very young parents, teenage parents, who, as the second child, and my father had aspirations for me, but my mother not only didn't have aspirations, but actually actively tried to stop me going to university. Not because I think she's an unkind person, but I think it took me a long time to get over the difficulties I had with that. But because she didn't understand, she probably still doesn't know what I do. My older sister was a hairdresser, my brother a carpenter, and my other sister a travel agent. That's useful. And they're successful in her view, but she's not quite sure what I do, except that I should be retired and I work too much. So it's very different. I'm also the mother of 3 children, 2 with disabilities. So that's a big gig, but it's the passion that drives me because my work is in early childhood development. and they're really good at teaching me. Neither are intellectually disabled, so they're quite feisty, particularly my youngest, who has a physical disability, and is currently studying a master's and is, they're a driver. And I sort of can relate to what Sarah was saying. There are things you want to do, and there are things that drive your passion. And in terms of difficult, yeah, there have been plenty of people who've tried, not just my mother, to stop me having an academic career, but it hasn't stopped me. Teacher, I was a teacher in disadvantaged communities. So I was a teacher first in rural Tasmania. Teaching was never going to be, I do teach, I'm a teacher now, but teaching young children was never my career aspiration. It was a journey on, and I then went and a way to build funds to study in the UK, but end up having scholarships to do that. But yeah, so being a teacher and those careers like teaching and nursing, I think are very, very important. We do have a lot of women doing those, and there are there are those women who are doing those jobs are doing an amazing job. Childcare, which is one of the parts of my work that I do, is looking at women, the workforce, because if we're going to have a safe and good quality childcare that enable many of the people in this room to actually do the jobs they do, we actually need to look after that. And that's and I'm extremely passionate, having been one and then moved on to do something else. And I do very much value that I haven't been just an academic, that I've been on the front line.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'll just briefly say mine, which is anything to stay out of the kitchen, which my daughter will definitely resonate with. So let's move on. I'm going to ask one question only and then open it up to the floor. So if you've got a burning question, get ready. And then we're going to have we got the microphone roving around somewhere, ready to hand it around? But let me start with a question that somebody submitted beforehand. Why do we still have this entrenched disadvantage and inequity for women? And the person said, even in new industries like technology, I would say especially in new industries like technology. But I'd love to, maybe I'll pass to you, Janeen, as an expert in gender equality and inequality. What are your thoughts on why does it continue, and maybe what might we do about it? And I don't know why I had that, because I've got my own. So sorry.
Well, that's a really big question, and that's been the subject of my laureate project. And I've got a team of people, some of whom are here today, helping me to unpack that. I think we have to unpack what we mean by gender equality. I do think that the domestic work and what goes on within households, as Debbie mentioned, is a big part of the puzzle, and that hasn't changed. So in Australia, as many of you know, more women than men complete higher education, bachelors of arts. We've got, roughly 50% of women in the labour market. We've had a female prime minister. We've got a female governor general. There's been a lot of progress in the public sphere. There's no kind of legal official barriers to equality, but there's this stuff that goes on within relationships and within households around mothering and fathering that is a real barrier, and which has not changed. So with the data that we look at in my team going back 20, 30 years, time spent on care and unpaid work is still very unequal, with women doing most of it. And it really spikes around that first birth. So things can be kind of equal within households up until then, but the first child arrives, women reduce their paid work, increase their unpaid work enormously. Men's track along pretty much the same. And that's a real barrier. So I think we need to look at what goes on around mothering and fathering. And I think we need to understand what people want around that. So it's not just, women don't just want to hand their child over to the childcare workers, even if they're very good. They want to be able to do that and their job. I don't think men necessarily want to be removed from fathering either. I think men suffer as well. So we've got this imbalance, which is not good for men, women, or children. So the laureate that I'm working on with
Mm.
my team, doing various projects around, is trying to unpack why is that still the barrier, and what do people want? What kinds of policies? Is it more paid parental leave, more flexible work? What are the policies that will help men and women juggle that really critical time more equally? And what do they mean by equality?
Right.
It may not be a 50-50 split. It may be something a bit different. So I think that's a real barrier.
Thank you so much, Janeen. Any questions in the audience? We're tight on time because of the unpredictable interruption. But is there anyone who'd like to ask a question to this incredible panel? Don't be shy. We are all here to learn. Anyone want to stand up and ask a question? Yes, thank you so much. Taz?
Thank you. It's absolutely incredible having six successful women and so great to hear the backstory. So if I could just ask, if you were starting your career today, is there one thing you did that you would definitely do again and one thing that you would do differently?
Beautiful question. So who wants to kick off? One thing you did that you'd do again and one thing you'd do differently. Sarah, do you want to kick us off?
Well, I mean, what would I do again? Do you know what? I was just talking at the table with you guys before. I literally pottered around for a good 5 years after my PhD, and nobody told me I had to publish. And I would totally do that again because the amount I learned in that time, I think we are depriving current early career researchers and students from that learning opportunity by expecting them to publish like mad, even before they have a PhD. I liken that to accepting a carpenter apprentice only after they build their first house. Yeah. So I would do that again. I would potter around and just take the liberty to learn. What I wouldn't do is actually, now I was thinking while I was talking, I was quite uptight about wanting a tenure track position in Austria. And I wouldn't do that again because actually it was totally unnecessary. My life unfolded much better the way it unfolded. And that was not a necessary pressure I had to put on me. And I think it's a pressure a lot of you face. And you can liberate yourself from that because life is much bigger than the next contract.
Thank you. Sharon?
I think I follow on well. Is that on? Yeah.
Yeah. Just put it close.
So I was a teacher but I had sights on doing something else, and spending time overseas is something that was really important. But also, I've moved around where I've worked. So I've worked in my PhD's in psychology, but I've worked in child psychiatry. I've worked at the Institute of Psychiatry in London. I've worked in child health epidemiology, and all of those things, which probably map to you. Spending some time working with multidisciplinary teams, learning skills. I've worked in behavioral genetics. I learned those skills and different designs and ways of working. And the thing that is my career path, which is longitudinal studies. So I worked also at the University of Bristol in child health epidemiology, designing a very large study that goes on today. We started in 1992, 14,000 families who are still participating today, and their children as well. And just working in a multidisciplinary team, taking myself overseas, being brave. Hobart to London was a big jump, but it was great. Scary, but great. And so that would be the thing I would say. Be adventurous, try things out. Don't necessarily, dig into something small, which I think is sort of the same as you, Sarah. It's, finding in that period of time what you want to do. Things I wouldn't do, I guess I wouldn't put up with some of the bullying I'd put up with in my career. I was going to say early, but all the time. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Jolanda?
Maybe in terms of what I would do again is have my children, have my daughters. But I was very much reflecting on what Debbie said, because I remember I was a postdoc when I had my first daughter, and that was actually while I was working here. And I remember the fear that I had that, okay, this is probably the beginning of the end, so I'm out. And I also had male colleagues, one in particular, I remember, who actually did say that to me when I said, hey, I'm pregnant. He said, oh, well, that's great. One less person on the job market to compete with because you will now go part-time and that means you're out. And that hit hard because that was exactly the fear I had. So all I can say is I think that it, of course, as everyone said, it's the hardest thing I've ever done is have children and raise them. But at the same time, I would also sort of really say it's the best thing I've ever done in terms of creating that balance and making sure that that actually there is something that I'm way more proud of than any sort of work-related achievements. And I remember one of my colleagues, when I did actually say to him, one of my former supervisors, I said, hey, I'm pregnant. He always said to me, that's really great because he said, when I had my daughter, he said, I really had a reason to go home. And the first thing to do when I got home was not open a bottle of wine, but go to my daughter. It's the best thing you can do. Oh, that's a bit too much information, but at the same time, that's I think a great way to actually think about that.
Yeah, fabulous. Janeen.
What would I do? I mean, a bit like Karen, I think moving around to different places. And I had the opportunity when I was a PhD student to spend some time in the US in a big sociology department. And that was a real eye opener that how work was done there. And then I went back as a postdoc. So spending time overseas was really useful. You get to look back at Australia and what's going on with fresh eyes, and that makes you understand things. And so that was really important. So definitely try and do that again. What wouldn't I do? Well, a bit like you, Karen. I had some pretty difficult experiences in my undergraduate and master's with bullying and harassment. And I think I would stand up to those differently. It was, I was naive, little country girl in a big sort of city. And yes, I think looking back, I would deal with those differently than what I did at the time. But it also made me stronger. So resilience has been really important.
Thanks, Janeen.
Thanks. What I'd do again is really embrace the opportunity, as people have said, to travel. For me, it was during my postdoc. I went to a place where I'd had a 2-minute conversation with someone on the phone and then turned up. But went with the intention that I was going to hit the ground running, but also embrace the culture around me. So that isn't in the workplace. I mean, you do embrace that, but the environment you're in or the cultural things it brings to you, because that is just a really interesting experience. The things I wouldn't do again is go with a mindset that I can control everything on the equation, and that if I do enough research, I'll have all the information, I'll make the perfect choice. What you find is, you don't know who the people are going to be disruptive to your life in really negative ways. And if that's your mindset, you can't adapt. I would be more proactive and intentional about stating, not accepting bullying, or they're often not bullying situations. They're really subtle, coercive, psychological warfare situations that push you in a direction that is less than what you might have wanted. And you don't realize that you've gotten there through a conversation that seemed rational until you got home. So sort of being more aware of those things. And I wouldn't accept people saying no. Like sometimes they will be right, there will be limitations. But dream big about what you want to do, and work out the framework that you need to achieve that so that you can start on that pathway.
Thank you so much. Well, look, there's a very clear theme there about sort of being bold almost and pushing and not allowing subtle expectations or pressures. And I have to say, having interviewed now probably 40 or so laureates, that would be the number one theme that always comes out. Take risks, try new things, explore, push yourself, use your initiative. That always comes out. Be bold. And one of the Women in Research webinars is exactly about that. So I encourage you to have a look at that. Now, time is short, sadly. So we are going to move now to the breakout groups. Janeen, I'm going to give you the opportunity to share one last thought while you've got this amazing group in the room, because Janeen has to dash to the airport. So she won't be joining us for the breakout rooms. And then after that, I'll get each of our laureates just to share what they're going to talk about in the breakout room. And by the way, it's not a room, it's a corner. So there's going to be 4 corners, each with a laureate, and there'll be me just out here. And we're going to tell you what we're going to talk about. And then when you're ready, you move to where you want to have the discussion. If there's already 30 or so people there, move elsewhere. We're going to do this twice. So then if you missed your favourite one, you have to run back really fast and get there quickly for the second one. Okay? So that's the plan. But Janeen, anything with this wonderful group of people you'd like to particularly share?
I'm sorry I have to race off. It's lovely to be here, and thanks for inviting me, Sharon. And I'd love to participate in the discussion. But I'm on my way to Canberra to my daughter's PhD graduation.
Wow! Congratulations!
That's something that you don't miss. What's my proudest achievement? Not the laureate, not the centres, but your children, and what they managed to achieve. So, I'm very, very proud of them. One thing I would say, I mean, you look at us and think they've had wonderful careers, which we have, but it's not just our own doing. I think careers are collaborative endeavours. They're not individual endeavours. And so my supportive mentors, which were part of my 6 words, they were very important. Debbie Terry was one of them when I first arrived at UQ. Cindy Gower was another. My mentor in the US. They're the people that kind of give you the opportunities. So I think that if you're going to be successful, you do need to be resilient and do what you want and all of that. But you also need to find the people who will help you find the opportunities that you need. So mentoring. And often they're not official mentors. They're just people that you happen to have a conversation with.
And they're often more than one, right? Because they serve different functions. Yeah.
And you don't have to take their advice, but it is great to have some supportive people around you who can, when you don't know what direction to go in or what you should be focusing on, to be able to talk to. So, look out for the mentors and the collaborators that will help you get to where you want to go.
Thank you, Janeen, and all the best for your daughter's graduation. Thank you. Right. So let's start at this end, Karen. So your session, can you give a brief advertisement for what you're going to talk about?
Talking about working with and for men. Some of the things that have come up today will be part of that story, but also
So working with and for men is what Karen's talking about.
but also then what Jenny's just raised, some of those issues of mentorship, but ask me anything about working with men.
Yeah, and in fact, you can ask anyone anything, really, but that's what you will share a few tips around. Jolanda, your advertisement.
Yeah, I think you gave this one to me, right?
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm very happy to speak about it. Staying curious, can't pronounce that word, and creative in a metric-driven academic world. So I guess I would say, of course, metrics are important. We need something to measure and to compare, all of that. But there is a danger that it becomes a goal in and of itself. And then it actually can undermine that creativity, the motivation, and even be a stressor that we don't need. I like your point, Sarah, about, why can't we just have 5 years that you're not allowed to publish and do some thinking? And that probably won't happen, but I think we need to keep those thoughts in mind about what kind of academic world that we want to create, especially for early career researchers.
Right.
All right, my topic is the longest one. It is how to make sure your university always needs you more than you need your university. And that's a topic that comes up whenever I have one-on-one mentoring sessions with people. It always ends up with that, and it actually has a lot in it, all right? For me personally, I'm a very loyal human to friendships, to husbands, well, one. To employers. And, in my perfect world, I would stick with the same employer for all my life. But that's not how academia works. Maybe that's not how the world works anymore. So you need to understand that and act accordingly. Otherwise, you are digging your own grave.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And
Thanks.
Gabrielle.
So my topic is managing a successful team. So it was pointed out that none of us are here without the support and the hard work and the buy-in from our teams. But generally, we don't get specific instruction on how to run a successful team. So I'll touch on just where might you start. And teams don't maintain themselves just by saying, I've got a team. Just a few points about what you might need to do to maintain those teams in a very changing local and global landscape.
All right. So we'll have Gabriella, if you can go to that corner, Sarah, this corner, Jolanda, and Karen, and I'll be in the middle, and I think we'll probably nip outside. So we'll have about 25 minutes, and then we'll let you know, and you can rotate to a second group. I hope that's clear for everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. I know that was hard to leave such great conversations. So what we're going to do now, I just thought each of the laureates could sum up a couple of key insights. So not like everything you've talked about, but something that's really resonated with you, maybe from the discussions that you've had from the two groups, just to share with the group. So maybe two things each, perhaps, that you can talk about, or one thing, if it's one thing, from each of your groups. Who wants to start?
Yolanda's got the mic, so I reckon we can get out there.
Well, you can have more if it's the short.
Look, I think this is not new, but I think I was talking to a fair few people who are early career researchers. Is it on now? Yeah. So I think I spoke to a lot of people who are early career researchers, and I always, I can feel the anxiety and I can feel the stress. And what I find quite frustrating at times is to almost sort of say, that was my 6 words, right? Go with the flow. But that's easy for me to say, and I very much understand that I don't have to prove anymore that I can write a paper or that I can pull in a grant. So I understand the precarious nature of the contracts and the lack of a future that a lot of you experience. And that's problematic, I think, as a sector, that we're not really sort of providing that certainty. I don't think I had that certainty either as a postdoc and sort of on fixed term contracts for a little while. I try and remember how I felt about that. I think I was indeed just going with the flow, more like, oh, well, I moved across the world a couple of times with family, with a husband who was happy to follow. So in that way, it all, came together in a way that worked for me. But I understand, and I also on a daily basis talk to people for whom life is very complex, with personal commitments and an inability to move or an inability to do lots of things that they would love to do. So I'm just becoming very aware of, the fact that we're all at a university with the same type of passion, but at the same time also, lots of obstacles, structural obstacles in terms of opportunities that we actually are getting long term.
Oh, you're handing to me.
Oh,
So we were talking about working with and for men, and one of the things that was asked was, don't we get, was the idea that we're fatigued with it, that it's there, and how do we solve some of the problems? So we want action. and we would like a direct line to Deb and a forum regularly, particularly for our ECR women. But not just ECRs, because actually even our most senior women, and you could hear it even in the panel, find roadblocks. And so we would like more there's some structural things, and we think some of the structural things have been done in UQ are not working and they need to be fixed. But there are also the more difficult on the two things that Deb named were about some of the attitudinal and less visible discrimination that happens, that means that we do have very successful early career researchers who are not making it beyond. And so I think there was sort of questions about how do you handle some of these these responses. I'd say call it out, but sometimes it's not easy to call it out as the person who's above you in the hierarchy. I've worked in 6 universities. I think this is the most hierarchical I've worked in, and I work despite it, not with it, because I can't work it out. But and so there are those things that we need to work with, but we also need to make change, and there's a call for action.
Oh, great.
Which is we want to forum directly with them.
Oh, we had a very wide-ranging conversation. So I asked my second team what the key insights were for them. And this is a little summary. Wait, I need to get into my thingy here. Oh, maintain your CV until you retire was one of them. Yeah, because it's not once you have a permanent job, is not the end of the story. Until the bitter end, they will assess whether you're worth keeping or not. So you've got to keep that until the bitter end. Do preemptive strikes. So a lot of people complain, well, my school wants me to do this surveys, be on this committee, on this committee. So we thought, well, actually, there's a lot of service roles that you enjoy. So if you are proactive and you say, well, I would like to do this, and this is of value for the school, then the next time your head of school comes and says, I want you to come on the committee, you say, no, I can't, because I have this big service role. So remember, it all boils down. Try to do what you love doing, rather than being constantly reactive to what society wants, the university wants, the school wants, whoever else wants. You cannot change the system for your lifetime. That's a really important insight, right? We all know, how it feels to be patronized. We all feel what it feels like to be treated differently in a job interview. We cannot change it for today's job interview. That's the reality. Probably for our lifetime, we cannot change, but we can change for tomorrow. Right? So it doesn't mean don't act, but it means you need to understand that the system is what it is, and you've got to learn to operate in the system. But you can and should aspire to take action to change the system for the future. I have to put my code in every time I talk too much. Quarantine learning time, right? Even throughout your whole career, you need to find time to continue developing learning as a human, as a scholar, as a collaborator. Have clarity and communicate clearly. For example, when you say no, I use the example of, how we get all these emails about, can you do the reputation survey for this and this university? Well, after the 10th one, I got fed up and I replied to the gentleman, with all due respect, I'm not willing to dedicate time to fuel a broken metric system of universities, right? It was a bit aggressive, but the gentleman replied back, I could not agree more. And that was it, right? So I think oftentimes when you're being asked, if someone wants something from you, you need to first understand, where do I stand? And then you need to clearly and politely articulate it, and that does help. Don't worry about what people think about you. Yeah, people think, people gossip. It's just not worth agonizing over. You need to know that you're doing the right thing. You do it. Do not worry what people think about you. And do what you really love doing. And if you find that academia is not going to make you happy, leave, right? There's a million interesting things that could make you happy. 40 years is a long time. If you feel this is not going to bring you the joy we have, you can see our joy, then you need to find something else that's going to make you happy.
Thanks very much. That's great advice. So we dealt with team management, and I think there's a couple of things. There's a structural thing of how do you acquire the skills to actually know what the frameworks are in which you should operate. And there's courses out there. Maybe this is something that UQ could embrace. So my lab go to a course that's run by EMBO, but there isn't a high quality course in Australia for that. And I think late PhD students and ECRs would really benefit from having something like that brought on board. The second thing is the less tangible, and that is how do you connect people in your lab to buy into your vision so that they're passionate about coming to work and delivering on what is needed? How do you build trust? How do you build confidence in those people to move forward? And that is a little bit harder, but it's really about listening. And it's not listening once a year at the APD. It's about setting in stone different checkpoints at which you will listen, or for ECRs to make a regular appointment to do that with your supervisors. Don't leave it all to your supervisors because they're really busy and it'll just get swamped. It's not that they don't care. It just got rolled off the calendar. So being really proactive and intentional about the decisions you make, I think is really important. Remember, teams are about people, and that means you have to consider how people operate together, listen to them, and try to find the things that will bind them together so the team can operate autonomously with some direction from you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. And I'll finish up. So we talked about staying sane and being proactive at the same time. And we talked about how it's really important to define that in your own terms, because if we want to survive in this career, a sustainable level of productivity does mean doing what you think is important and valuable and interesting. We talked about some of the more practical strategies for doing that and managing time, and how that is the bane of many of our lives, that demands just escalate as we advance. How do we effectively manage time? And some of those simple things that we all know around schedule what's important, put it in your diary, that we know but we don't always do. And then finally had a lovely comment from Kelly, I think it was, about the importance of habit. And actually I just would like to connect that to the Women in Research webinars, which we call the Small Wins series, because it's all about what are the little things that I can do to get more support for myself or to shift direction. And just this idea of habit and writing habits or time management habits and shifting those. And you can see, thank you, Caroline, is showing these are all the webinar topics that we've had on Women in Research. They're all there. You can watch them. They're on video. The tips are there. Laureates from not just UQ, but all over Australia. So I encourage you to do that. But thank you. That was what we covered. Caroline, back to you.
Excellent. So I guess that brings us to the end, actually. So all we have left is mouse. I'll see it. I guess just to say thank you. Really, I want to thank the panel. Thank you all for coming. It's been amazing. I'm so pleased so many of you could come spend so much time with us. Thank you, Sharon, for doing this. It's been amazing to have you here. I know so many people are looking forward to meeting you as well. So thank you very much. Again, I do want to thank all the schools and institutes that have been involved in this, which has been enormous. It's been great because it means we've got really good UQ representation, and I'd love to have more events like this and bring more people together. And I guess now we just have Fig Jam, our wonderful...
If I can just have one comment, Caroline. First of all, thank you so much to the panel, and I'd love to see this action forum going forward. If you guys can't do it, who can, really? So good on you. I just would like to thank Caroline. You know, we talk a lot in women research about the importance of, being bold, doing things outside your comfort zone. And I think you have exemplified that, Caroline, as a senior lecturer who has organised this event, brought it all together, had some profile, hopefully, in the process, but really done a terrific job. So just like everyone's put their hands together.